Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alistair.
And this episode, we step away from our usual Moderate Fantasy Violence 12A action stuff to talk about some recent British comedy, as there's been a bit of a glut of good sitcoms lately. We've got This Time With Alan Partridge, bringing back Steve Coogan's classic character. We've got Derry Girls, the second series of last year's big new comedy breakout hit. And we've got Fleabag, the era-defining story about a young woman dealing with serious trauma. No extra question this week because we're reviewing three things and there's only so much work our delicate little hearts can stand. But before all of that, Alistair, what else have you been consuming apart from these three different sitcoms?
Well, I've been watching another show, and it's one we reviewed last year, which is that I've been diving into the second series of Star Trek Discovery.
Yep, I've been meaning to get to that.
So yeah, it's good. It's a good follow-up to the first series. I think they got some notes from someone somewhere, which basically said, well, the people making it got some notes from someone somewhere that basically said, make it a bit more like old school Trek, not quite so much its own thing. So it is a little bit more, I don't know, the Star Trek we're familiar with. I'll avoid any spoilers for Series 2 and also Series 1, but I will sort of dance around maybe some Series 1 spoilers by saying the first series had a sort of shadowy, possibly untrustworthy, possibly a little bit dodgy captain character, as the main protagonist of the show is the first officer of the ship, rather than the captain. They've kind of dispatched with that in this series, and they've got Captain Pike, a character from the original Star Trek series, who is very much your classic, straight-up, decent bloke, space adventurer, Star Trek captain.
I mean, I assume they had that note already, though, because, or at least a fair chunk of it, because the untrustworthy captain was pretty much dealt with by the end of Season 1.
Yeah, so I guess at some point people were like, yeah, they made a decision to go back to something that's a bit more familiar. I think maybe towards the end of Series 1 or, yeah, at some point. So, yeah, maybe it's just to please the fans a bit more. A good friend of mine who's a big Star Trek fan speculated that was why, although it is just speculation. Or maybe it was, this is where they wanted to take the story. But it's still good. It's still very arc plot focused, unlike classic Star Trek. It's got a mystery at its core. It hasn't got anything quite as crazy as the Terran Empire from the last series, which I did really enjoy. They're back to some stuff that's more normal. Like most episodes, they go to a planet or some kind of place, and sort of there's like an episode plot about something that happens there. Like they travel to Saru's homeworld for one. They encounter there's a couple of episodes when they encounter strange sort of cosmic phenomenon and have to investigate them for one episode. They also resurrect some one-off species who appeared in the original Star Trek series back in the 1960s, so there's some retro stuff for the fans. Overall, I'd recommend it, although maybe not quite as good as the latter part of Series 1.
See, I really liked Series 1, perhaps mostly because it was a bit strange, to be honest. It seemed to ricochet wildly between tones, and in particular there's the last 5 or 6 episodes were this mirror universe story, which seemed to be bordering on sort of high camp comedy.
Yeah.
It was very odd, but I really, really enjoyed it. I have seen a lot of people give roughly that consensus that Season 2 is a bit of a step towards what they describe as classic Trek. And as someone who's never really heavily followed classic Trek, I'm excited to watch Season 2 of Discovery and see if I still like it.
Yeah, well, there isn't anything that I've enjoyed as much as, like, yeah, the Mirror Universe, Terran Empire, although it's not finished yet, and it is good, and they do have an interesting mystery. I mean, yeah, but it is possibly more serious, possibly more, like, as I said, the Star Trek we're familiar with. But I'd recommend giving it a go. I mean, Sonequa Martin Green is still excellent as Michael Burnham, the main character. They've kept Michelle Yeoh, who was from the first series, her character, who's obviously, she plays a very good villain. Shazad Latif is still walking around as the flayed Klingon. So yeah, there are lots of good stuff from the first series they're picking up in the second series.
Yeah, it's on the list. Once we've almost finished Crazy Ex-Girlfriends, then we might give that a go. I do hear everyone seems to like the guy playing Captain Pike, to the extent that there seems to be a bit of a give him his own show campaign going on at the sort of grassroots fan level. So I'm excited to see what the fuss is about.
He is good. Also, he really, really looks like the actor who played Captain Pike in the original 1960 series. There is like a phenomenal bit of casting, even to the point that they have a flashback bit when they use footage from the original Star Trek, the original series.
Yeah.
And kind of put them together, and it really does convincingly look like the same person. So that is an impressive bit of casting, or some very good makeup.
I think that's the dude who was the lead character in Marvel's Inhumans series, their one big failure. So it's nice that he's landed on his feet.
So yeah, I'd recommend it, especially if you like the first series, and especially if you're like Star Trek, even if you're like a massive Trek fan, or someone like me who, I don't know, casually dips in and out, but always has a soft spot from Star Trek, back from when Next Generation seemed to always be on when I'd get home from school when I was about sort of 12 or so. Anyway, Nick, what do you have for our listeners this fortnight?
Well, in the last week or so, I've been reading Sweet Tooth, a comic by Jeff Lemire. Like many comics, it's set in a post-apocalyptic world where the world has been decimated by some kind of plague, and one of the survivors is this little boy with antlers, who's sort of this human deer hybrid, and there's a lot of other animal hybrid kids running around, and everyone thinks, possibly correctly or not, that they're responsible for this plague. So he sort of lives in the woods and is persuaded to emerge and goes on this quest to discover the truth of it. It's written and drawn by Lemire, who also wrote Descender, a comic we covered way back in the past as part of our recommendations feature.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Descender, both the story and the artwork. Yeah, that does sound really good.
So yeah, this is written and drawn by Jeff Lemire, who has a very sort of nice, delicate, appealing art style, which really works for the sort of, especially for the stuff that he both writes and draws. He tends to go in a very sort of literary direction, like, this is a kind of quite a standard post-apocalyptic quest narrative, except a lot of the characters are like children who are also animals. Like at one point there's a girl who's also a pig and a boy who's a crow, and some other people turn up. And they're very persecuted by horrible scientists. The tropes being explored are often quite standard, but what's nice about it is the sort of quite soft, thoughtful literary fiction way where he picks through the characterization. He did a comic called Essex County, which is just about some people who live in that specific area of Canada. And there was another one called Royal City, which had a couple of weird time travel gimmicks, but was largely quite simple stuff. And he does a good sort of psychedelic breakdown to show all these people's emotional states just collapsing. And yeah, it's very indie, but it's very fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the bits of Descender that we read for this podcast, and I do want to go back and read more. He's certainly an interesting writer, and obviously, writes some great sort of space opera. So it'd be interesting to see what he does with something that's, like you say, a bit more down to earth in sort of the literal as well as, artistic sense. Also, I wonder if he's related to the Luminaire brothers, who was the early cinema pioneers.
Is their surname Lemire?
I think it may, yeah, it might be spelled. Might be spelled differently.
Maybe. But yeah, he works in a lot of genres. He's an interesting guy. He's got a horror series, again, drawn by someone else. The one thing that sometimes seems a bit of a shaky fit is really aggressively sort of mainstream Marvel DC superhero stuff. He's done quite a lot of it, but some of it sometimes seems a bit like it's not really working for his style. Although he did do 15 issues on Moon Knight, who is a sort of punchy, vengeance-y urban warrior superhero whose gimmick is that he has multiple personalities and they're all different people, and he uses them as a tool in his war on crime, which did lead Jeff Lemire to be able to do lots of psychedelic dream sequences as he, tries to reconcile and integrate his split personalities.
That does sound interesting. Maybe someone who, I guess, responds better to the slightly offbeat, unusual titles.
Yeah, I think possibly the stuff that's a bit more character-driven and a bit more emotion-driven, I think might be more the word I'm after. I think he does better when he can, really sit with the character's emotions for a while, rather than feeling pressured to push aggressively into plot. Might possibly be the magic Jeff Lemire formula. I've been reading a lot of his work lately, which might be why I'm now able to deliver this long thesis on Jeff Lemire. In fact, to be honest, my big comics recommendation for 2019 and the back end of 2018 would be to go and read Jeff Lemire stuff.
Oh, excellent, yeah. Well, yeah, I might take your recommendation and sink my teeth into that.
Ah, sweet teeth. I see what you did there.
That's the joke.
So...
Now onto the comedy. Now, it is on to our British comedy special, when we will be reviewing, this time with Alan Partridge, which is another meta Alan Partridge, Knowing Me, Knowing You-esque show. Also, the second series of 90s Northern Ireland set Derry Girls, and the second and final series of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag. These are all new instalments of successful British comedy series, and we're going to review all three of them, pretty much starting now. So I'll start by asking Nick, which one of those did you think was the funniest?
The funniest? Probably Derry Girls. Out of those three, I think this time with Alan Partridge I enjoyed, but I think it's probably... I don't know if it fired on all cylinders in the same way as the other two. And Fleabag, as I've said before when we've discussed season 1, is sometimes a bit more of a sad comedy drama than it is a flat-out comedy. So yeah, Derry Girls I had a good time with the whole way through. So yes, I'd say Derry Girls was probably funniest. And the second series did very much continued the tradition of being very funny from season 1. It's one of these shows that's actually quite hard to dissect. It flows nicely, the characters are always in character. Like, the closest I can come to a complaint is that there are so many regular characters who are funny. I never feel like we get enough time with any of them in, like, 6 25-minute episodes. Like, I'm not saying do 45-minute episodes, because that's often where sitcom humour just dies. But more episodes would be sweet, guys. At least they're getting a series 3.
Yeah, I think the thing with Derry Girls is it's really like well written kind of joke. Like every scene or almost every sentence is either setting up a joke or paying off a joke. It's up there with sort of kind of classic Simpsons in terms of like the density and fast moving humor. And obviously, yeah, you've got a huge range of like very funny characters, like, you know, the main character, Erin, all her friends, all her family, and, you know, the associated other characters in the orbit. Yeah, this series really nailed it. Probably Derry Girls, I thought, was the funniest of the three as well. Although I think they were all good in their own ways, and we'll come to that. But this was the one I was kind of most excited for because I really enjoyed the first series. And I think also, as well as it being a really funny show, I think it's also important that right now we shine a spotlight on Northern Ireland and its history. It's not an area that's been represented much or even at all that I can think of in British TV, drama or comedy. I mean, I can think of a few like classic Northern Ireland-based Troubles era crime films.
Yeah, I watched several series of Ballycus Angel, but I don't think that really took much time to shine a light on the Troubles.
And obviously there's the Crying Game, but I do think right now it's important that we focus on the history of Northern Ireland with everything that's going on with Brexit and Northern Ireland politics kind of being thrust into the limelight a bit more. Having a show that kind of digs into Northern Ireland's recent history is actually a very good thing.
Well, yeah, but I think the Troubles as a thing that's actually active are, at this point, far enough in the past that I think possibly a lot of people, to go vaguely autobiographical for a second, although not really, because what I'm about to say is I barely remember any of it. I'm 35, just 35. Hi, everyone. And my active recollection of the Troubles is quite low. I think it was something that was just coming to an end as I started to perceive the world outside my house.
The Good Friday Agreement was reached in 1998, and although I have lots of memories of the 90s, not so much about the politics. But what I do really like about Derry Girls is it brings in a lot of 90s nostalgia. Like there's an episode when they're going to see Take That, which apparently was a real big event when Take That, it was like a big deal when they decided they'd play Belfast on their tour. So, and obviously I remember Take That and like the Cranberries song Zombie that like crops up in one episode and lots of other bits of music from the period. But it's kind of an interesting commentary on nostalgia. I think the show, how it takes nostalgic things and in a kind of retro funny way, but marries them also to kind of some of the grim bits of history. So it's a commentary on, like, I guess, a nostalgia being like we only remember the good and forget the bad.
Well, it seems to be like one or two times a series. Like in the first series there was one, and the second there was a couple where they touch on the wider politics or, you know, have something grim actually happen to remind you that, you know, it's not all fun games and making fun of the soldiers.
Yeah. In the first series there's a bit when there's like an orange march.
Yeah, but it's mostly treated as just something that the lead characters find annoying.
Yeah, it's kind of very much in the background. The second series does include like the ceasefire and Bill Clinton's famous visit to Northern Ireland. And speaking to people I know who are our age, who grew up there, they do remember these things quite clearly. Like, yeah, when the ceasefire was declared, and especially the Clinton visit, because it was like a big deal, which is what they do in the final episode of the show, which I really liked, the last episode. It kind of had a real kind of sweetness to it. And one of the things I really like about this show is it's really, really funny. The jokes come thick and fast. But usually at the end, especially in the last episode, they try not to finish on a big joke, but finish on like a sweet moment, which gives you this really nice, warm feeling at the end, which is something that, again, classic Simpsons did really well. It's something King of the Hill does really well. So I think it's a sign of great comedy writing when you can be really funny for like 19 minutes and then have like a really sweet 1 minute on the end rather than an additional joke. I think that works really well.
It was also in the penultimate episode, the prom one, which I thought was fantastic. I mean, if I was going to have a favourite episode from this series, it's probably the prom one, just because I thought it had a combination of some of the best jokes and a nice sweet ending that didn't necessarily kneecap any of the jokes, because there was kind of a joke happening at the same time. That was, I thought, probably the best one. I was actually quite, wow, that was a bit of a climax. I'm kind of surprised there's another episode after this.
That was definitely the funniest episode. And also what I liked, which my girlfriend pointed out this to me, so this is a stolen insight, which is that the first series, which ends with one of the large bombings in Derry, and I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, the first series ends with an IRA bombing. There's a scene of violence in the community, but it's contrasted to the family and the friends coming together. Whereas the prom episode has the opposite. It's when the ceasefire is declared, so the community is coming together in peace. But the friends are in the middle of fighting each other on stage covered in red paint. So they... so, which is... Yeah, which makes sense when you see the episode. So it's kind of the opposite, which I quite like.
I had the note, but maybe they should have had the prom be the finale and the president one be the start of Series 3, but I imagine the writer knows what she's doing. I mean, at least they're getting a Series 3.
I did like how in the last episode they dug into the character of James a bit more.
He had a couple of good moments in this series, possibly to build up for the bit at the end where the characters have to actually care about him. He can't just entirely be the butt of the jokes for the entire time. There's a couple of moments where he gets to, be nice or achieve something.
Yeah. I mean, all the characters are brilliant. Like, I've been thinking for a while, which is my favourite character, and I find it really hard to decide. Like, the main character, Erin, is like a great main character and just a really...
Yeah, but she's awful.
Yeah, she's awful, but she's a really good teenager in that she's like really self-absorbed and kind of has these like grandiose ideas, but is also kind of like petty. The Claire character is just sort of brilliantly daft. And the Michelle character is one of those sort of like larger than life characters that like jumps off the screen. There's a brilliant smaller character like the granddad who's just constantly sort of mean to the father.
Yeah, I saw someone on Twitter say what they should do is make a prequel series where we find out why the granddad hates the dad, which, not to name and shame that person on Twitter because I can't remember their name, but they should not do that.
No.
That would kill the joke. The whole point is that there's no reason, or if there is a reason, it's because he's married to his daughter.
Yeah, the reason is he's putting his penis in his daughter, and that's why he doesn't like it. That's the reason. No further explanation is necessary.
And he'll finally stay on screen in the series finale.
Yeah.
His dying words to those who need it spelled out, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, for those who need it spelled out.
Oh god, they actually might kill him off in the series finale, mightn't they? Well,
there's the sort of thing they might do.
Anyway.
But also there's loads of brilliant characters, like the sort of really vindictive Mother Superior who is sort of in charge of the school they all attend. There's Orla, the slightly or very mad sort of survivalist cousin.
I keep waiting for her to have her, like, spotlight episode and really dig into her character, or at least really give her a few big, stupid things to do, but maybe that would defeat the point as well. Like, I liked the episode where she got into step aerobics.
Yeah, that's in the first series.
That is in the first series, so I'm outside my remit there. So yeah, maybe that's what I'm really saying. She didn't really seem to get a bit that big in the second series.
Yeah, she didn't get as much to do. They also featured more some of the background characters a bit more, like Uncle Callum, the most boring man in Northern Ireland, and it doesn't help that he talks in this slow Irish drone.
Yeah, that was pretty unbearable, yeah.
Yeah, but he's a very funny character.
Ardlo Hanlon turned up to give us all a Father Ted flashback.
Yeah, that was good.
Irish sitcom on Channel 4. There's Ardlo Hanlon. Good to see.
Yeah, he's back. He's on tour now, so he's having his moment again. They do kind of bring in the politics a bit. Like in the first episode, they're going to this like Friends Across the Borders or Friends Across the Walls, a kind of like camp when they have to hang out with Protestants. And obviously, it all goes wrong. They're very good at basically setting up a concept. Like they go on a school camp, they go to take that. They try to organise a prom, and obviously you're just inevitably waiting for it all just to completely fall apart.
Yeah, I have a vague feeling of thinking the first 2 episodes didn't build to as much of an amazing climax as I'd hoped, but the 4 after that were pretty good.
The first episode does have the amazing ending when like Claire's suspended on a cable and thinks that this Protestant person is going to kill them because...
Oh, that bit was great, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was thinking of like the actual last minute of the episode, but yeah, that joke was great.
Yeah, overall it's phenomenally good. Yeah, I'm really excited for the 3rd series.
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing one. I mean, I know normally with these sort of shows you say, oh, I guess they've only got until the kids hit puberty, but they're all in their 20s, and I think one of them's in their 30s, so
yeah, whatever.
Maybe they'll be able to keep doing it for another 5 years, who knows.
Yeah, exactly. I think they have gone for slightly older people.
Yeah, I've no idea whether that's a coincidence or whether it was a desire to avoid them aging out of the parts. I mean, I'm sure there's an extent to which there might still be an issue of, and they're how old? But I've sort of got at least to have a couple of series in them.
Well, the in-betweeners were all in their post-university when they started playing teenagers, which I think one of the reasons why they managed to get enough series of the in-betweeners without them looking like weirdly old.
It was getting a bit borderline by the 3rd one. I'm not sure if that wasn't one of the reasons they stopped it. But yeah, we'll see if Derry Girls can go beyond the 3 series in-betweeners mark.
Yeah, but yeah, it definitely is the one that I thought was the funniest of the 3. And it's interesting to contrast that to Alan Partridge, because
that's the one I thought was the least funny of the 3.
Yeah.
Going straight in for the snippy joke, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. But I think Alan Partridge is the one that I had the most nostalgia for. Yeah, I guess because I've been such a big fan of, Partridge over the years. And so many great shows. I mean, the obvious note about this is as much as I did like This Time with Alan Partridge, obviously it's not as funny as I'm Alan Partridge, or even like probably Knowing Me, Knowing You, previous outings for Alan Partridge. But I kind of think they weren't like, it's weird, they sort of weren't going for that, or once I kind of accepted that this wasn't going to be as, the best thing Partridge has ever done, I kind of enjoyed it more. Like, I think there was an interview with some of the writers, the new people in the Partridge writing staff, the two brothers, the ones that aren't Steve Coogan or Amanda Iannucci.
Yeah.
An interview with them, and they said, one of the good things about this is, I'm paraphrasing, but they said something along the lines of, the good thing about writing Alan Partridge is the best years of Alan Partridge are clearly behind him, so that gives you the freedom to kind of do what you want. Which is kind of funny, but also, kind of true, that once you accept that This Time with Alan Partridge will not be another I'm Alan Partridge, and it's a kind of almost like unfair to hold it to this standard, it can still be good in its own right.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but as someone who, although he has enjoyed previous Alan Partridge, they weren't as big a part of my formative years. I don't hear Partridge shouting Dan as I fall asleep or whatever. As I'm sure you do. But
that is a good summary of what goes on inside my brain. Dan! All right.
If anyone wants to record that and just set it as their ringtone or something, then feel free to come. If you ever find one of us in real life and show us that you've done that, then I'll buy you a drink or something. This offer is only good for about a week after the release of this podcast, just in case we become a lot more popular in later years.
Yeah.
But yeah. I possibly because I lacked the nostalgia, I did just sit there going, well, I'm kind of waiting for this to become amazing. Although there were quite a lot of bits that were very funny. Like, I think I found myself enjoying the sort of outside broadcast sketches a bit more than a lot of the studio stuff. Like some of those, like his piece on vegetarianism.
The one he tries to go a week without eating meat.
Yeah, that was amazing. that was really funny.
Yeah.
And as was his incredibly defensive shit screed about his traffic arrest, complete with a much better looking actor playing him in Reconstruction.
Yeah.
That was gorgeous. And some of the studio stuff was good as well. I liked the running joke where he would have people on to interview, get into really stupid, petty conversations with them about absolutely nothing, and then they just run out of time and never get to say anything meaningful.
That is classic Partridge, the pettiness kind of defeating anything he tries to do. I mean, I think you're right that the bits that were not in the studio, so just context for those who haven't seen this show, is that it's a kind of a pastiche of like The One Show, which is, I guess, if we have any non-British...
aggressively anodyne British evening entertainment shows where they do really, really bland promotional interviews and informational content and shit.
Yeah, and it kind of cuts between bits in the studio and kind of pre-recorded bits out and about. And the pre-recorded bits are basically a series of sketches. This is much closer to being a sketch show than like a sitcom like I'm Alan Partridge was. You're right, those are some where the shows it's funniest. I think possibly my favourite, other than some of the ones you mentioned, is when he has the episode about corporal punishment in schools, and he goes back to his own school, and they kind of superimpose Alan Partridge's face over like a 10-year-old kid's face.
Yeah, wasn't there one where he was trying to entrap some random BBC presenter for taking bribes?
Yeah, and obviously it doesn't work at all. I did like that they did the one when they digitally de-aged Alan Partridge. They released that like the day after we recorded our episode about them digitally de-aging Samuel Jackson for Captain Marvel, and we didn't get to mention it at all. So mentioning it now, they're like, that's an example of definitely some uncanny valley digital de-aging, but it's obviously intentional.
Uncanny Valley and a sort of robot invader. Oh my god, what's happened to Alan? Type stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of like they stuck his face on a balloon.
And the running joke of Tim Key's being awful at Twitter, again, I'll take it. It made me laugh. I think kind of akin to the one or two episodes of Derry Girls I mentioned. I was always a bit disappointed that most of them kind of failed to build to a glorious comic climax. There was a bit of it in the first couple of episodes, but after that it always seemed to just run to a stop. I kept waiting for it to really explode at the end. And I did like the one where he accidentally got into this sort of whole thing with the previous host being outed for sexual harassment live on air. Yeah, which was the second episode, I think. That's
the second episode. Yeah, I guess it was them, Alan Partridge tackling both Me Too and the sort of series of sexism scandals that the BBC has had.
Yeah, with no grace whatsoever. And yeah, it was quite funny the way that just built through the episode until they were just yelling about it at the end. But a lot of the others didn't really have quite that level of payoff for me.
What I liked about it is they did a very good job with that, of basically not making fun of Me Too or sexual harassment, which obviously clearly isn't funny, and like only people who try to make fun of that sort of thing are kind of Family Guy edgelord type comedy writers. Whereas what they kind of trying to work out, like, where's the humour in like Alan Partridge? And the humour in Alan Partridge is that kind of he always gets it wrong.
The joke isn't that Me Too allegations are stupid. The joke is that Alan Partridge is stupid.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, when he's just like reading out from the Twitter stream, like all the kind of accusations of crimes that are like live on air. And also the fact that like, it's kind of a joke on the institution in that, how the co-presenters try to sort of brush it under the carpet a bit. It's kind of, they're making fun of like institutions that have covered up these kind of allegations. But I thought they handled that well, which is something that could have been difficult to handle, but like a difficult subject for humour, but they managed to find where it works, like in the character.
I think they had another Me Too bit where he just talks over them for the entire episode, didn't it?
They had another episode which was kind of when Alan Partridge like arrives in like a sports car with full of cheerleaders, and they're kind of making a joke about representation of women in the BBC and these kind of chat shows, and kind of the joke again very much is poking fun at shows that think this sort of thing is all right, kind of just having women have the background as sort of part of the furnishing, but also kind of poking fun at the very sort of heavy-handed, slightly clunky way that these kind of shows try to tackle big issues like this.
Yeah, I always feel like I might have got more out of this show if I'd seen more episodes of the one show, but it is not something I have watched ever, or at least not for longer than about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
There's a degree to which Alan Partridge is clearly making fun of tropes of very mainstream BBC programming that I, having switched to streaming services almost entirely, just don't watch anymore.
Yeah.
Me and the mainstream BBC have lost touch.
Just going back to one of the things you said is that one of the things that did make this show very good also was like the guests they got on. Like, as you said, Tim Key's really good as the sidekick for Alan. Simon Farnaby was very good in an episode he guested in. I've really enjoyed his work in Detectorists. There's a character of Ruth I really liked, who was this reporter who Alan Partridge has spilled a drink on at some previous event, and now she's annoyed at him and contradicts everything that he says. And I do like kind of builds to the one when she's talking about that her partner proposed to her, and Alan Partridge is like, "Oh, you must be so excited," and she's like, "Well, nervous more than excited." She can't even agree with him that she's happy about getting married, which I thought was very funny.
Yeah, there was a lot of laughs to be had in this. To be fair, as you say, I enjoyed it on a sort of sketch show level. There were lots of bits, and a reasonable percentage of them hit. I would probably watch it if they did another lot. I think they've said that they are committed to doing more Partridge in some form.
What they've said they're doing is... So I don't think they're going to do another series of This Time with Alan Partridge. I think the current plan is they're going to do a show called This Sceptred Isle with Alan Partridge, which I believe is a quote from Jerusalem, or maybe somewhere else. But anyway, it's going to be a spoof of like a kind of historical documentary, kind of making fun of the sort of Simon Sharma school of historical documentaries, I love Simon Sharma documentaries on the BBC, but there's definitely a format that could be poked fun of. There's one episode of This Time when Alan Partridge talks about the history of a peasant rebellion in Norfolk, and they have like historical reenactors recreating it, and I think it's kind of that sort of tone is what they're going to go for in this new Partridge show. I believe that's what they're doing.
Yeah, I think they've probably taken the This Time joke about as far as they can. So yeah, I'd be interested to see them move onwards to different BBC formats. Can they do a whole episode of Top Gear with Alan Partridge presenting it? I'd watch that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely what they should do. I mean, when Jeremy Clarkson was fired and the other two walked off Top Gear, there was a petition that got an enormous number of signatures, including myself, for Steve Coogan to be the presenter of Top Gear, but in character as Alan Partridge, and that would have been phenomenally good, even if they only did it for like one episode. Steve Coogan is like a big petrol head. He's really into cars, and he's been on Top Gear quite a lot as well, so I don't know if that would kind of work.
It would be poking the edge of the meta bubble quite a lot, yeah. Just do like 1 or 2 episodes just for the fun, or I don't know how you do Alan Partridge gets poached by Amazon. I feel like it would have to be really ludicrous, overblown and stupid in the same way that the Grand Tour kind of is.
Yeah.
What would Alan Partridge do if given the chance to really overindulge himself to entertain the dads?
Yeah, have a big budget Amazon show. Well, exactly. Maybe it's coming at some point. I think the idea behind This Time, which is quite good, is that this show is kind of supposed to be very old-fashioned and a bit retrograde, but the idea is that the BBC is really worried about it's becoming too young, too hip, too Remainy, and they want to cater to like a wider, older audience, because they don't want to be accused of basically being on the wrong side of the culture war that we've got going on in the UK and the whole world. So they want to expand their kind of old-fashioned programming aimed at old people, and that's why they've like rehired Alan Partridge. I've listened to podcasts from various sorts of TV writers who kind of are very aware of the kind of shows that they're riffing on with this time. The names escape me right now, which isn't helpful, but like, yeah, a very old-fashioned style of programming with a kind of older male presenter and a kind of young, sort of good-looking female presenter, and it's all described, I think, once as hand on leg presenting. Yeah, which is that's kind of what they're making fun of with the whole thing, and I kind of like it's like a meta joke, you know, which they do very well. Like they did that with Know Me, Knowing You, the Alan Partridge chat show they did in like, the 90s. They did that with the Day to Day, which Alan Partridge like kind of first appeared on as a character. It's also kind of what they did with like this sort of celebrity autobiography that they did with the Alan Partridge books they published. So I mean, Alan Partridge is good when he's back to being a meta joke.
Well, yeah, I think there's probably only so many shows you could do about Alan Partridge. So yeah, if they could think of another format to plug him into, I would probably watch it.
Yeah, I think doing a historical documentary, which BBC historical documentary, is probably a good next step. Yeah, I did enjoy this, and also I do like how they've aged the character. Like over time, Alan Partridge has become a bit more relaxed with the modern world, a bit less kind of easily wound up and kind of annoyed by things. He's mellowed as he's got older, which is good that they've kept the character changing and evolving over time, which is what's given, I think, this character such longevity. It doesn't feel like they're doing the same jokes over and over, but it kind of also, they still have the same core of their character, which is Alan Partridge tries hard but doesn't really get it.
Yeah.
Trying to think of a way to segue to Fleabag.
Speaking of people destroyed by angst about the modern world, let's talk about Fleabag.
Fleabag, yeah. Or, you know, from a show that's deliberately riffing on quite an old-fashioned kind of TV show, we should move to something that's really quite modern.
Yes, from riffing on the old shows to the now. It's time to talk about Fleabag, the most modern show in the world.
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's definitely the kind of the sitcom that grabs modern society by the horns and tries to wrestle it to the ground, or at least modern middle-class North London wealthy society.
Yeah, Fleabag seemed to successfully grab the attention and apparently the souls of almost everybody I follow on Twitter, which suggests I follow quite a lot of reasonably middle-class writer types, but then again, I already knew I did that. Among the class of my Twitter stream, this is probably one of the TV events of 2019. It's basically this and Game of Thrones in battle for the crown of TV event of 2019 so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. Obviously, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, straight off the success of Killing Eve last year, that was brilliant. And obviously, a couple of years ago, the first series of Fleabag was also brilliant. And yeah, this series is as brilliant as the first one, maybe even better. It's certainly, I think this was the best in terms of like critical quality or like well executed television. Fleabag is the best of the three, although Derry Girls I maybe enjoyed more because Fleabag isn't necessarily something you always enjoy, although it is always very good. But I guess that is intentional in that it's funny, but it's also quite sad and depressing.
Well, yeah, I've called it a sadcom several times. But yeah. It's probably the best in terms of, I don't know, raw writing quality. But I do have a certain soft spot for Derry Girls, because although I have seen quite a lot of sort of darkly comic mental health journey shows in the last few years. I mean, Crazy Ex-Girlfriend is not the same as Fleabag, but it's not a million miles away either. You know, I've not actually seen that many sitcoms, especially British ones, which have grabbed my attention for long. So yeah, if we're talking British comedy, I do almost feel Derry Girls might be more significant, even if I also have to agree that Fleabag is better. But yes, this Fleabag, I mean, to be fair, this series of Fleabag isn't as much of a long, grim, dark night of the soul as the first one.
No.
It's not a knockabout comedy yet, but although she's got shit going on, I never felt there was quite as much risk of it ending in something horrendously bleak. You know, if they were going to do the most bleak possible ending, that was probably going to happen if they finished it after series 1. But this one, I always felt like it was, you know, her very slowly and shakily getting herself together to some degree, rather than anything else. I always felt, but especially when I heard it was ending with the last episode of this series, I mean, I guess I'll avoid directly spoiling it, but it always felt like they were vaguely heading towards her standing up, dusting herself off, and walking into the sun to some degree. Even if it wasn't, you know, spectacularly upbeat and shiny, it didn't feel like she was going to get, you know, knocked down at the end.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about like how characters have progressed, like Partridge, like there's clearly progression in this series, in that the first series was very much about someone whose life is completely falling apart. This second series, I think, is more about someone who's kind of pulling their life together but experiencing some big bumps on the way. You know, as you do, there's a clear progression for all the characters. In some ways, like the first episode begins with the main character who is anonymous or just called Fleabag.
Yeah, I don't think she's even addressed as Fleabag. I mean, Fleabag does sound like a bastardization of Phoebe. Yeah. So it's entirely possible that the lead character's name actually is Phoebe, like Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but
Yeah.
I guess to avoid making it seem like it's too autobiographical. That isn't actually said.
Yeah, the sort of ostensibly anonymous main character. The first episode begins with her father and her father's new girlfriend following the death of her mother announcing they're going to get married, and then the last episode is the marriage. This is also the most plot oriented of the show, and I guess we will have to talk spoilers, which may spoil your enjoyment of this, because this, unlike Derry Girls or Partridge, this is a sort of show when actually I guess you probably appreciate not knowing the twists when they come. Anyway, well, there is a spoiler warning here, sadly, for the rest of this sentence, which is that, like, you know, her sister Claire, the first episode, her marriage is in trouble. In the last episode, it ends, but that's kind of a positive thing because her husband is awful. They introduce a new character, and that character is like a complete arc. You know, there's a real sense of progression, I think, with this show.
Yeah, there were times during the final episode where I thought they might knock off the dad, but they did not, in fact, knock off the dad. Spoilers for things that don't happen in the final episode.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking they might have a really grim revelation at some point, and I had some speculation about what they were. And I probably feel no need to kind of speculate on the horrible things I imagined for the Fleabag characters that didn't happen. But I quite like that they didn't have a big grim revelation at the end.
No, I think, as I say, I think the arc of this series was always ultimately towards some degree of realistic but positive self-acceptance rather than, oh god, everything's still fucking awful. So I didn't really expect anything truly dreadful to happen. Or at least anything dreadful that the Fleabag character would ultimately see as a positive. Like, you know, I don't think the Fleabag character would have entirely minded if the marriage between her dad and his girlfriend didn't happen. But on the other hand, I think the way it played out was also acceptable to her. I don't think her life was destroyed by anything that happened in that episode.
No, exactly. And yeah, it worked out well. And also they introduced Andrew Scott as a character just called The Priest. I think he's another nameless character, which was, and he was brilliant. Obviously, loved Andrew Scott in Sherlock before it went terrible, and yeah, he's generally very good, and he was brilliant in this show.
Let's be fair, Andrew Scott mostly got out of Sherlock before it went terrible. By the time it went terrible, he was just a face on a screen.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think the core of Fleabag, a lot of it is the sort of the character writing and the observations of the various characters, especially the main one, obviously, but just the way they interact and the sort of arch brittleness of it. It is very posh British because there's quite a lot of people being polite to each other in a way that's entertainingly clear that they actually hate each other.
Yeah.
That's a very common Fleabag interaction, and it's always quite funny.
Yeah, and also it deals with, like, you know, very middle class things like, you know, Fleabag running her own small business, therapy, you know, Claire and her high-flying business career, things like that. The father's new girlfriend is an artist. They don't have anything as brilliantly weird as the sexhibition in this series, which is, in the first series, the artist girlfriend character, played by Olivia Colman, who's brilliant in everything, and it's brilliant in this, was putting on an exhibition about her sex life, featuring, obviously, lots of stuff about the Fleabag character's dad, her current boyfriend, which was very funny. Though they did, like, there's the bit like the Olivia Colman character wants to give her dad a painting of his daughters as a wedding present, but she paints in a kind of weird style that's like Claire's face straight on, but the Fleabag character is like the back of her head, so you can't see her in the picture, which is kind of brilliantly passive-aggressive.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I almost wish that the wedding had been a bit more batshit, rather than being comparatively normal, but I guess that wouldn't have got the tone she wanted for the final episode.
No, exactly. And it does end on a really positive note, I think, a kind of... Yeah, she walks off and you get this sense that, you know, wherever she's going, she's going to be okay. Her life is on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, her relationship with the priest is... It's a very nicely observed bit of drama. Everything they say to each other has a certain loaded meaning. There's a lot of give and take. There's a certain sort of push and pull chemistry between them in that each of them is trying to sort of persuade the other of something, even if I'm not sure either of them are actually sure what it is. They just want to, you know, get involved with the other one's life in a way that they both know that they can't really. It's a very nicely dramatised, and yeah, in some ways I guess it might be seen as a bit obvious that how are we going to shake things up in series 2 of Fleabag? Oh, we'll bring in a new possible love interest, sort of, but it's so layered and interesting, and Andrew Scott is really good in it, but yeah, it still works, which is obviously a tribute to the writing by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, which is the main star of this show.
Yeah,
although you don't need to really differentiate because she's also the actual star.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, the show is all about her, and she is brilliant in it. Yeah, I kind of like the relationship she had with the priest, which is like it wasn't quite so like obvious as like he's just trying to convert her, and she's like God isn't real. Whereas it's more boils down to the priest is basically someone who's kind of optimistic about life and thinks there's kind of good in the world, which I guess is why he's decided to become a priest. And Fleabag is someone who's a bit like, I've seen a lot of dark things and I don't feel particularly optimistic or good about life. And they're both kind of sort of trying to convince each other
Yeah.
of their view, but without it in like a hostile, aggressive way, while also trying to be friends and then later more than friends. That's
Well,
as
yeah,
Fleabag often is.
yeah, they clearly like each other's company and they're having these conversations in an enjoyable way rather than an antagonistic one.
Yeah.
I mean, I gather this show was, like, this whole series was originally a play way back in the day.
The one-woman show, yeah.
Possibly more the first series than the second one, but yeah. Although weirdly, there were bits of this that almost felt very play-like. There was quite a lot of Fleabag and the priest kind of monologuing at each other, or Fleabag monologuing at the camera in some episodes.
Yeah. Well, one of the conceits of the show is that in a kind of meta way, slightly kind of, I don't know, post-peep show sitcom, and also slightly bring in theatre influences, how Fleabag turns and speaks directly to the audience in a kind of way. And then they kind of really took that to a meta level in this second series when she goes to therapy and is talking about how she has friends that are everywhere and constantly with her. And obviously we were trying to directly bring in the audience as a sort of element of the plot. It was definitely quite a meta direction. And I also like the fact that when Fleabag spoke to camera, the priest noticed, whereas none of the other characters seem to be aware that Fleabag can talk to the audience, but the priest is, which I don't know, is there something about because they're both also nameless characters?
I mean, the extent that Fleabag is talking to the audience is, I don't know. I mean, maybe it does just exist in a heightened reality where Fleabag can see us, but I think really it's just her drifting off and smugly talking to herself.
Yeah.
And I think the priest is clearly just tuned into her enough that he can tell when she disengages from the conversation briefly to make a smug aside to herself.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, was it established in Series 1 that the camera is actually Boo following her around? Her dead friend?
I don't know if they're as explicit as that. It's a possibility. There's a possibility that it's the ghost of her dead friend. There's a possibility that it's a kind of like a meta thing. Again, like the way that you can hear the thoughts of the characters in Peep Show. This is just another way of expressing the thoughts of the character without using voiceover, which is A, heavy-handed, and B, a bit too Peep Show.
Okay, since we've given a spoiler warning, I'm now going to give a mega spoiler warning because I'm going to spoil the last shot of the series. But in the last shot of the series, which will be the last shot they ever do unless Fleabag comes back for a comic relief special in 10 years' time, she literally just tells the camera to stay behind and walks away from it, which I guess you could read as her finally leaving the ghost of Boo behind her forever, or you could just take it as a more vague metaphorical statement of her taking a big step in her journey towards being okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's beautifully ambiguous. You can interpret it how you want, and I think those are all interesting ways. And also with the meta thing, again, something that my girlfriend said, all my best insights have come from her for this episode, was that it goes to show, I think as you were saying, that like the priest is kind of a nice guy and really cares about her, and that he can tell when she's like, drifting off or whatever, which is a nice touch, when all the other characters are way too self-involved.
Yeah, I think it is a lot of the time a show about awful people being awful at each other. A lot of Fleabag is awful, but she's spiky, certainly, and a lot of her family are portrayed as quite awful. I mean, we are aggressively on Fleabag's side because she is the one giving us monologues. So who knows how it would look if we were in Claire's head and getting her monologue. Yeah,
and also it does a good job of balancing the comedy with the drama. And also kind of, it does sort of make a serious point and tries to tackle big issues, but without kind of beating over the head about it. Like, sometimes it's funny, like, there's an episode when Claire gets an awful haircut that doesn't suit her, and Fleabag has a sort of monologue that, like, a feminist monologue saying, like, hair is everything. We wish it wasn't, but it is. The episode I really liked, could even be my favourite episode from Fleabag, is the one when Claire has to present a Woman in Business award that Fleabag is catering, and she accidentally destroys the award and then has to use the statue from the first series as a substitute, and then get it back from Kirsten Scott Thomas, which is a brilliant cameo. And she has this monologue when she's talking to Fleabag over cocktails, saying, like, women in business, it's like a child's table thing. It's because men, even in this day, don't accept us properly as part of, like, the business world or accept us as equals. And, like, it's got a strong message in it, and it's really digging into feminist issues, but, like, in an acceptable, digestible way. Yeah, which I liked about the show, that how it could do very funny and it could do very serious, but also very serious in kind of emotional breakdown, people having depression, but also very serious in terms of, like, here's some of the other problems with the world, like, even in the 21st century, we don't really have, or certainly don't have, complete gender equality.
Well, yeah, the monologue she did in the confessional in episode, I want to say 4, got a lot of attention for its sort of stark, honest, and slightly heartbreaking depiction of, millennial life and not really knowing what to do.
And not knowing what to believe in, yeah. That was brilliant as well, yeah.
This is probably a show that will go down as one of the big statements on our time, which is obviously in some ways more, air quotes, significant than something like Derry Girls, although I will take my right to watch Derry Girls and have a nice chortle to my grave. But yes, this is probably going to be one of the big significant cultural events of the year, and fair play. It's very good.
Yeah.
And also, I hope she sticks to finishing after 2 series.
Yeah, definitely. It's good. It's 2 series. It's done. Like a lot of brilliant shows like Spaced or Life on Mars, things like that. Classic 2 series and you're done. Yeah, and also the first series was such a huge hit and like an unexpected hit, and it's really difficult. Like, how do you follow up such a huge and unexpected hit? And like, well, with something that's inevitably going to disappoint people. And with both Fleabag and Derry Girls, they managed to follow up huge unexpected hits with something that generally didn't disappoint. Alan Partridge, even, I would say that, like, once you accept the fact that I'm Alan Partridge is in the past, I felt that it also, following up a big hit, but not disappointing.
I'm still in the middle of watching the last series of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, as I said earlier. A show which has something similar to this in, but it's a show with a lot of messages about both mental health and feminism, and it's about this woman getting her life together after some degree of breakdown. And yeah, they have, to be honest, kind of carried on past the stage Fleabag reaches at the end of this series, and it's a lot of her just very slowly getting her shit together, and it's funny, and it's still charming, and it's still got a lot of the tropes and stuff I enjoy about that show, but I can see why Fleabag have entered it here. A lot of it's kind of just going down a bit of an obvious path. It's like, okay, now she's going to get her shit together. She's probably not going to backslide and destroy everything, because that would seem a bit depressing and pointless after all that effort she took in the first place, because, story structure. So why not just stop and not show it? And yeah, I can respect Fleabag's decision to do that, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, this is the right point to end it on. And like they wrapped up I really like the fact that like Claire got a happy ending. The wedding went ahead and it was fine. They wrapped up the plot with the priest and things like that. Especially like Claire character getting a nice ending. I was worried that she might be a character who got something unpleasant happen to her, and obviously like she left behind her awful husband. Although, again, he had quite a good monologue when he's basically like, I'm not a monster, I'm just like a dick. I quite like the kind of nuance they did with that, because like in a lot of TV shows and sort of sitcoms which deal in broad emotional strokes, basically people can be like either entirely horrendous and awful to their core, or kind of entirely good and the people you sympathize with. When he was basically like, I'm not very nice, but I'm not a monster. But he was like, yeah, but I still don't like you, so can you leave me? I like that.
Yeah, it was a nice exercise in slightly putting us back to liking that character. Well, not liking, because as he himself said, he's not really likable. But, giving us a moment of, nah, he's just a guy, before he still had to fuck off because he'd still been acting like a twat for years.
Yeah. I know, I do really like how this show can be kind of intelligent and sensitive and deal in nuance, and would also be like very funny, like, just like devastatingly funny. Like there's a bit when she's like snogging the priest and like a picture falls off the wall of the church. It's just like stone cold silence, but it's very funny. Or like when the priest is like believes that foxes have a vendetta against him and follow him everywhere. It is hilarious as well as, or just like as soon as she picks up the trophy and it just smashes instantaneously and you're like, oh god.
Yeah, that's a nice moment of sort of inevitability, and also things like the picture falling or the fox, it's stupid, but it's also kind of plausibly, I don't know, it feels like something someone might believe, which is quite fun.
All the sort of things that people ramp up to kind of make themselves seem charming or funny or interesting. It strikes me as realistic. The show does realistic well, but also in a very funny way.
Yeah, it's probably the most TV I've watched at the same time on British channels in a few years, maybe? It's been a while. They've all finished now, so I guess I'll go back to just watching Netflix.
Yeah. My summary in this is that it does go to show that, obviously the momentum of modern television and modern visual entertainment is very much obviously with the streaming services, which is where the interesting, creative and funny things are happening. But it goes to show that like traditional networks like BBC and Channel 4, if they hire the right people and give them the right creative freedom, can create brilliant stuff like Fleabag and Derry Girls.
It was nice to see some good half-hour format shit, as regular listeners may have picked up. My slight weariness with hour-long premium telly continues apace. So these fun short packages were very much something I was in the mood for.
Yeah, and like I said, I really enjoyed, having a routine of like coming home from work, cooking, doing some writing, and then having like TV to watch like at the time it was on the TV, and then checking Twitter afterwards and seeing what people thought of it.
Well, we'll have it with Game of Thrones for a few weeks.
So yeah, now we've had the comedy part of the year. Now it's the grim, snowy medieval warfare part of the year.
Oh yeah, head chopping incest. I'm ready.
I have nothing to add to that.
No comment, said Alistair regarding head chopping incest. Okay, and that's all we've got for this fortnight on Moderate Fantasy Violence. Thank you very much for listening. If you want yet more things related to us, you can go to moderatefantasyviolence.com, where we have old episodes, articles, unheard chunks of old episodes, all sorts of Moderate Fantasy Violence themed items. And if you particularly enjoyed the podcast, then please do go to iTunes, Stitcher, whatever pod website you get this from, and leave us a nice review, because I hear it helps other people join you in the club. Thank you.
You can also follow us on Twitter, where we are at MFV Podcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching for Moderate Fantasy Violence. You can find me on Twitter by searching for at Alistair J.R. Ball, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
Yep, and you can follow me as at NickMB on Twitter, or you can go straight to nickbryan.com, which includes details of my comics and books and other writings, and also a link to that Twitter account. Okay, and that really is it. We will see you in a fortnight for, I guess, the superhero movie, if not general geek culture event of the year. Yes, it's the granddaddy of 12A moderate fantasy violence movies. It's Avengers Endgame. And to celebrate this epic team-up, we are bringing in a third person to the podcast. Yes, it's the artist formerly known as our Harry Potter correspondent. It's Claire Russo. See you next fortnight. That's definitely a valid way to phrase it. Goodbye.
Bye. Done.